Delighted to bring you the next installment of the Talent Way show. As most of you know by now, my name's Lee McQueen, and we're on a mission to find out if talent waste exists through our research, our statistics, our brilliant guests that we have on the show each week. And I can tell you, this week is no exception to that at all. This is the Talent Waste show, and we believe that talent waste affects organisations across all industries. Now, whether or not it's between 30 and 45% of employees within year one leaving the organisation when they don't want to, as reported by the Office of National Statistics. Harvard Business Review report that 80% of employee turnover is due to bad hiring decisions. And we're trying to understand whether or not Chartered Institute of Personal Development talking about a cost in excess of £12,000 to £30,000 per year for every bad hire. When you put all of them statistics together, it is really, really important that as businesses across the world, we start looking at poor hiring decisions, unconscious bias, bad cultural fit, inefficient onboarding processes, and of course, a lack of learning development pathways as well. A disengaged employee it can be very, very costly, which I'm sure my next guest will like to talk about as well. Last time out, we had the wonderful Rob Green, founder of RecTech, who is on a mission to solve one of the biggest problems in recruitment and HR industry, technology. It was a brilliant episode, and you can follow Rob via their website, which is rectech.io. You can also catch up on all the shows that we've done on Crowdcast, on Spotify. Yes, people, we are now on Spotify to download as a podcast. You can also catch us on YouTube or follow us at phoenix51.io. Of course, most of you are watching live as well on LinkedIn, so you can always follow us on our LinkedIn profile. But enough about the past. Let's talk about what we've got in today. Today, my guest is the expert of all things HR and learning development, the amazing Lorenzo Giliomee. Lorenzo has an amazing career so far, spanning the likes of household names of Saga and O2, through to working in the public sector with the likes of the Thames Valley Police, which I was quite surprised to learn, and also the NHS as well. Lorenzo is now working with the most powerful organisations on the planet. And if you haven't guessed who that is already, it is Amazon. I'm delighted to spend the next 30 minutes or so with Lorenzo. Lorenzo, welcome to the Talent Way Show.
Hello, Lee. Thank you so much for asking me to join you.
No problem at all. I absolutely love it. And of course, I've given a little bit of a highlight to the viewers and to the listeners already. But just for those of you who don't know who you are and those who haven't met you as such, talk to us a little bit about Lorenzo in your background.
Yeah, well, thanks, Lee. You know, those of you listening and watching will certainly pick up that I've got a southern accent. So I'm a born and bred South African. I've been living over here in the UK now for 18 odd years. So at the moment, I have a particular focus and interest on the British Lions and Irish Lions versus South Africa rugby tour. So I'm a big rugby and barbecue fan. I've had a varied career. My career started off in the military. I had the privilege of serving as a naval officer in the South African Navy for 10 years, and I spent quite a bit of my time abroad while I was in the military and learning about other militaries, other cultures, etc. So it was a really interesting time in my career, and that is how I stumbled into HR and learning and development. And I've been in this industry now for the last 18 odd years in the UK, and like you mentioned, working for some big and interesting organizations. And I've always been either in learning and development, organizational development, or leadership and talent. So I've always worked with people, and I love working with people because no 2 days are the same when you work with people. So I love that.
Lorenzo, you mentioned there, just delving into your background, into the military. I mean, you was in the naval forces, weren't you, for a while, as you said. What sort of learns did you have, or takeaways did you have from them types of experiences with people? Because there's a lot of pressure in business, isn't it? A lot of pressure in organizations whereby you have to hit targets, you have to hit please the shareholders and so on and so forth. But it doesn't get much more pressure, does it, than working in kind of the army or the navy or the forces, really? So just wondering, what sort of takeaways did you have from that?
That's a good question. It's an interesting question. And throughout my career following the military, I've always reflected on and built on what I learned in the military. So takeaways for me, one was invest in your people. The military are champions at investing in people, training. They get to know people. Their leadership development is absolutely fundamental because they know people make the military tick. You need soldiers, you need airmen, you need sailors. So, a takeaway is that real investment in people. Training is outstanding. You know, they also know their people really well. One thing that militaries are generally really good at, and the British military is exceptionally good at this, is succession management, talent management, because you need to think long term. You know, so they go through eventualities, they do scenario planning, they really try and anticipate constantly what might happen in the future, and they do long-term planning.
I just literally wrote that word down, scenario, because you talk about scenario planning. This is where it's really interesting for me, is that actually understanding people is about understanding their behaviors and understanding, you know, if they're competent at something or not. And if they're not competent at something, it doesn't mean to say that they're bad. It just means to say that we've now identified, correct me if I'm wrong, a skills gap or a competency gap, which we want to be able to plug. But we can't plug that unless we identify it. And I think that with the military and linking it back to kind of assessments and that type of stuff, really, that scenario-based kind of observation, looking, understanding is critical. If they wasn't to, I don't know, role play, for want of a better expression, if they wasn't to practice, if they wasn't to put themselves in scenarios when they were in a real life scenario, they wouldn't be able to handle it, would they?
Absolutely right. And even though it was nearly 20 years ago, the training was very much scenario based. And really seeing how people would react in different situations. And then, you know, the skills gap that you would identify would never be a bad thing if it's picked up in a training environment, because you think, well, now we can do something about it. And, you know, so they were very good at identifying those gaps, doing something about it. But another thing, Lee, that really stuck with me since being in the military is the philosophy of building on people's strengths. You know, it's really focusing on the strengths. But to build on people's strengths, you need to know what the strengths are. You need to put them through the scenarios and, you know, to know what they are, and then you build on those. And you know, that's something that's always stuck with me, is build on people's strengths, get to know what they are, and accelerate the strength development.
Interesting as well. Again, accelerating that strength development and building on top of what you've already got is a different mindset to saying that you haven't got this, so therefore you're not good at this, or we're going to make that strength yours, or build on that. Just following on from that, actually, then, have you seen, Lorenzo, over? Sorry, that was my Siri talking. Have you seen over your career then in kind of in business, in organisations, some of the adaptation or adoption, if you like, of them techniques at all? Have you got any experiences with that?
You know, it's a good question. One of the things that I've observed throughout my career is there is no one size fits all. Different organizations approach it so differently. I have worked in some organizations that have had a particular focus on, you know, assessment centers and, you know, and trying to create some kind of simulation. But to be honest with you, quite often they're quite boring, those things, and they're very, very sophisticated, and more resource going into trying to put the assessment center together than the output that you actually get. So I've worked in organizations that have always tried to do these types of things, but in my experience, they're often overcomplicated. You know, and hand in glove with that, Lee, is they don't always know what talent they're looking for. They know they need talent.
But what? What type of behaviors?
What type? Exactly.
Exactly.
And then then the focus is quite often on the gaps. You know, we identify the gaps rather than really identifying what are these people exceptionally good at. And then what benefits do they bring? And often those strengths are not, you know, you don't have a direct line of sight between the strength and the business outcome. Sometimes you need to think quite creatively. And because everything is often so process driven, you know, when we need to think outside the process of identifying talent, that's where we struggle. It becomes the gray area. And in my experience, companies have often struggled with the gray.
No, that's really interesting. So I suppose easy follow-up question for that. What sort of challenges have you seen, if they have been struggles in the organizations you work with? How have you overcome them? What have you kind of implemented in your role, or as more of a company-wide? Say, for example, when you worked with Saga, or essentially when you worked with O2, for example.
You know, some of the challenges that I've observed, other than the ones that I just shared, were, one was not knowing exactly what talent the organizations needed. You know, so to address that, and hand in glove with that, is they either don't know what they need, or they look at talent very one-dimensional, through one lens. You know, and I've worked in organizations where we had a talent strategy and we had an ambition to keep talent and not to waste talent, but we didn't know what it means. It was very subjective. So one of the key things is you need to talk to the senior leaders in the team, in the business. You need to look at your strategy and take that subjectivity out of the equation. Say, what do we mean by this whole thing of talent? And the only way to do it is you need to have quite robust conversations and debates, because everybody's got a view on what talent means. The second thing is, often organizations, when they talk about talent, and I saw that in O2 when I was the head of talent, is our initial approach to talent was very much leadership potential. Who are those people who can climb the ladder vertically? Who could be a future head of a department or something? But when we stood back and we looked at our business and we looked at where the risks to the business might be in the future, we realized, yes, we need to identify talent for the future in terms of leaders, but we also have technical talents. People who have lots of implicit knowledge, tacit knowledge. If we lose them, we will be
losing the knowledge almost as well.
Exactly. They are talent. And then we started looking, but what about our DE&I agenda? Women in leadership, STEM, all those sort of things. So we took a step back and said we are looking at talent too one-dimensionally. It's not only about the future leaders of a business, it's also the people who are the future subject matter experts, the graduates, how do we drive it? So it was taking that step back and saying, talent is not just one thing. Something else that I've observed, and again, I'll just reference O2 at this stage, is, organizations often struggle because they have a learning and development strategy, a people strategy, a talent strategy, and it's different things.
Yeah,
and you think, but actually, we're talking about people. You can't chop people up in different, so you have to integrate this and think about people, much more holistically. And one of the things we tried to do at O2 very successfully, actually, was we said, we want to develop the whole employee. So that means not only the person who comes to work, it's also the person who's at home.
Outside,
It might be a family, because if you invest in the whole person, then you breed commitment and loyalty and all these types of things that people want to contribute. So you don't waste that talent. You don't actually lose that talent. And then something else, Lee, that I've observed, and many organizations, actually all the organizations I've worked with so far have struggled with this, is, you do need insights. Organizations often overcomplicate talent. So something like Phoenix, your platform, you get valuable insights about people, about the talent ecosystem that you are in, so you can make informed decisions. And quite often, organizations struggle with that. That's certainly one of my experiences.
No, for sure. It's interesting actually. You talk about the whole person or the whole employee, and I don't think, I might be wrong in saying this, so forgive me, viewers and listeners, but my personal opinion is that I don't think this has ever been as high on the agenda as it has during COVID. And I think what COVID's taught all businesses is actually, we're now in our homes, right? You're home now. Like, everybody watching and listening is in your home. You're in my home. This is fundamentally a huge shift to what we were doing, say, 2 years ago. And yes, working from home is not a new concept, but actually being in people's homes when the dog comes in or the cat jumps up, or your little ones pass with an ice cream. These are little things that make all of us human. And that's actually what we are, right? We're trying to do business with different business, organizations, trying to get into Amazon or whatever it might be, but actually what we are at a very simplistic level is two human beings doing our jobs and talking to each other and have our own families and so on and so forth. And I think that I don't know whether you've experienced this as well, but I think the world has changed their view on that because of what's happened over the last 18 months. Would you agree?
I completely agree. I was reading an article yesterday, Lee, on LinkedIn, and I don't know, I haven't looked into the science behind it, but there was a prediction made that in September of this year, there's going to be an increase in resignations.
Wow.
And there was some research being done by LinkedIn, but like I said, I haven't done all my homework behind it. But it was really interesting when I started looking at the comments. People are going, well, why are we expecting this potential increase in resignations? This waste of talent. And the comments were really interesting because people were saying, with a potential return to the office, I don't want to go back to what I had pre-pandemic. My world has changed in the last 18 months. and it's interesting. We no longer talk about work-life balance. It's just balance.
Yeah, it is.
So it was really interesting, and I want to follow that research a bit more to see if it really does become a reality. But it was really interesting because the people were saying, I'm no longer in the same place. I want different things. I expect very different things. And I think we're facing into a really interesting challenge where organizations need to make a decision. Where are they going to position themselves?
I agree. I mean, it was a few months ago now. I think it was back in the spring, but one of the CEOs of one of the major banks come out and said, "No, I want people back in the office. I want people suited and booted, essentially shirt tie, back in where they need to be." And other organisations like the likes of Amazon, like the likes of Google, like the likes of Facebook, said, "No, you got a working from home contract essentially for forever now." I've read so many articles around this subject because of Phoenix 51 and the virtual aspect of what we can do. Our platform is all about physical assessment center and virtual as well as competency-based interview, and you can do that virtually or physically. So it covers both angles. But actually, 40% of the workforce is predicted that they won't go back into their offices, and I think that's making a huge. Boardrooms now around the globe are facing some big decisions because they're having to close down their office space, but they're having to keep some of it open because 60% are going back in, and actually you don't, as an employee, you don't really know where you're going to be. So are people wanting to work from home because actually it's an easier life, or are they working from home because actually they're even more productive? There's some businesses now that do a 4-day working week as standard, not a 5-day, and it's just interesting to see the impact. And again, what we're talking about in the end is data. How are these trends going to play out over the next kind of 6 months, 8 months, 12 months? We've been able to do things during the pandemic that I don't think any of us ever wanted to do. Let's put that clear. But actually, we've been able to do things through the pandemic that we didn't think that we could do. Homeschooling, for example, has been tiresome on a lot of people, but actually that time we probably look back on quite fondly. Would that be fair?
I completely agree. And if I may follow up on something that you said there, it's really interesting. In my time at O2, when I was looking after people development in particular, we had a challenge with people not engaging with all our learning propositions and products that we had. And we had some really exciting things. And we couldn't understand why we were struggling with why are people not interested in what we have on offer. And a long story short, we dived into it quite deeply, really tried to understand it. And looking at data, what we realized is, people wanted choice. So when we were promoting learning, in the beginning, we were saying, you can only do this learning through a mobile phone, or we want you to do this learning. We were very mobile focused, saying mobile, do it on a tube somewhere, but no one does those stuff things. But long story short is what we realized is people want choice. They want to be able to decide how they learn. How do they develop themselves? And it's exactly the situation we are in now. People want choice. I want to choose whether or not I go back into the office and how I do it. Now, the challenge that I see coming in the world of talent is in organizations I've worked in, we had a culture where you have to be in the office to be seen. If you want to progress, it's important to be seen.
I think
now in the virtual world, you're not there.
I was going to say, just to interrupt, I think everybody's been in that situation, haven't they? Everyone that's watching or listening now has been in that situation where their employer or their boss is expecting to see them physically or whatever it might be. Do you think that the mindset of so-called bosses and the powers that be is changing, Lorenzo?
You know what? I don't know. Is the honest answer. I hope it does. I think for organizations, I think it's a bit naive to say it is changing because I don't know. But Lee, I think in the organizations where the mindset isn't changing, I would predict a waste of talent and exit of people. When COVID is over, we look back at this 18 months and the world economics have changed, everything. I think people will start voting with their feet generally. I think organizations where that mindset is changing, they have a massive opportunity ahead of them. And I hope they know what the opportunity is, how they reposition themselves, etc. But, we need to educate leaders in the business to think differently.
I completely agree. I think what's also really interesting as well is your angle or your take on change. I know it's really passionate for you, and actually that transformation part, it isn't just about telling somebody or a bunch of people or a business you're going to do it this way now because actually the stuff you've been doing is wrong. It is about taking them on a journey, is it not? And
Absolutely.
And standing like these are the reasons why, and this is what the benefit's going to be. What experience have you had with them sorts of things? And again, bringing talent waste back into it, have you lost people in your team or in your businesses you worked in because of a result of transformation and change?
To your first question, one of the key learnings that I've had, and you know, the successes I've had in the past when I was looking particularly after leadership development, and when I worked in O2, just as I joined O2 in 2014, we were going through a potential merger at that stage with BT, and then it went into Hutchinson Rampoa. But a long story short, we were facing into this big challenge of merging with a new organization, transformation, all these types of things, and we pivoted our leadership strategy to say what we want to do are really two things. One is we want to upskill our leaders to be able to operate in this very uncertain, ambiguous environment really well. So upskill our leaders to be really good in the change environment so we can continue to hit and outperform our commercial ambitions. You know, and the second thing is we want our leaders to lead our people so that we don't lose them in the transformation. You know, and one of the things that we try to reinforce with leaders all the time, and I think about my kids, is when I tell my kids not to do something, they never listen. But, you know, because kids don't follow what you tell them, they follow what you do.
Yeah.
And that was something that always, you know, stuck with me when it comes to educating leaders. Is you can say to leaders, you know, people can say, oh, you can work from home, you can do this, you can do all these things. But if I'm in the office every single day from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening, are people really going to be at home? Quite often they're going to follow my actions and not my words. You know, so it's important that we because people aren't stupid, you know, and we need to change that dialogue and say, you know, what you say and what you do needs to be aligned.
Yeah, for sure. That for me comes down to that culture and values piece as well, and understanding. You know, I've done a lot of work around kind of how, what, why, and Simon Sinek. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and you know, a business start with why, and having a purpose around your business and our mission and what we're trying to do as a business, however big, small, or indifferent that you might be. And I think that to get people to be bought into change or transformation, to get people to be bought into where we're going and what we're doing, and to be retained, you need to understand the company's values, the company's culture.
Absolutely.
You know, the behaviors that everybody wants to be in. Per job role, it is very different. I understand that. You know, the job that you do is very different to the job that I do, for example. But actually, we work for the same company because we share the same beliefs, or we share the same values, and that is what that company's values and cultures are. And this isn't about writing, you know, 5 bullet points or whatever on a post and sticking them on the wall. This is actually what you totally believe in. And how many lives have we changed today in the NHS, for example? How many lives have we changed by making somebody's birthday happen in Amazon because they've got the present of their dreams?
I agree.
And, you know, it's things like that make a difference, rather than it just being I work for Phoenix 51, or I work for Amazon because I just work there. Does that make sense? Does that
complete sense? Complete sense. You know, and that experience that I had in the past in one organization where we went through big change, a big transformation, we were really successful in terms of not losing our people prior to the change. And the reason for that wasn't because people were not offered new bonuses and all these types of things. And, you know, what we did was really focus on why do people choose to stay at that organization, really go into the values, really take the values from words on a wall to understanding the emotional connection that people had with the organization. And we leveraged that in a really positive way throughout this period of transformation and uncertainty. So, you know, Lee, what it resulted in is everybody bought into the why behind the transformation. Everybody was prepared to give that 100%, 110%, you know, and we continued to outperform our competitors. We continued, you know, we had a motto in the organization from our CEO saying, make us impossible to ignore. And you could see everybody was like, I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know if I'm going to be here in 12 months' time. But while I'm here, I'm going to give my 100%. And that was amazing to see. And we maintained talent. People stayed with the business throughout that time.
No, I totally agree, and I think that it's how do we measure that? How do we use that? What tools do we have? You know, a lot of businesses that I talk to, Lorenzo, have kind of initiatives in place like that, but they're still quite manually based.
Yeah,
they're still working on, dare I say, Excel spreadsheets and pen and paper and that type of stuff, and bringing talent into the business, which is still kind of what I would term, and forgive me, watchers and listeners, but you know, old school, and actually bringing that stuff up. I'm not saying let's go full automation, but what I'm saying is bring it up to, you know, the digital revolution. Let's digitalize some of the stuff that we're doing, not only to make it more business efficient, but actually enabling us to look at the data and the insights to understand where the key values and behaviors are within each individual, and you know, do they match what we want? And you know, you mentioned earlier about the future side of things, but also it's the here and now, and also the future. Can, you know, people, organizations talk about, you know, EVP and their employer brand and how really important it is, but there's nothing worse to harm your employer brand than people leaving within the first year, or leaving the business continually churning, rinse and repeat. That is probably the most damaging part that you can have.
I agree.
So it is important to wrap that around. I mean, have you got any experiences with digitalization or automation, that type of stuff?
I certainly have views on that, Lee, that I'll share. So, you know, with the EVP, you're spot on. So often it happens where you join an organization with an expectation of an EVP, and then you realize your expectation is not reality, and then people leave. And that is such a missed opportunity. I have, unfortunately, too much experience with the manual processes and the spreadsheets and things like that. But, you know, that's a reality organizations face into. But when you were saying, you know, I think we should have the ambition to automate, to simplify this thing. I'm a big supporter when it comes to people development, is to think about employees like consumers of your business, like customers, you know. And I often talk about and encourage my teams to think about, you know, let's think about good marketeers, you know, really good marketing, really good marketing. They never make decisions without knowing exactly the impact it's going to have on the customers. You know, why would people buy into that? They do segmentation, they do their research, they have the insights, and they have real-time tools to understand what customers are doing. In Amazon, we know what our customers want. We know what they are doing. So why don't we apply the same principles to talent and to employees, and say, let's understand our people well. So, you know, technology, Phoenix 51, that is, for me, I think that's a really great opportunity to be able to make informed decisions.
Yeah.
You know, and just stand back and see what the data tells you, because I have been guilty of making assumptions, and you put 2 and 2 together and you get 5.
Yeah.
Only to realize afterwards, actually, I didn't have the right data. So I'm a big supporter saying, think about your employees as consumers. And if you were selling a service, you would really want to know what makes them tick. So let's put the mechanisms in place to do that.
I totally agree. It's interesting. I was speaking to a customer earlier today on a different meeting, and they were talking about utilizing. It was our platform, obviously, because they were customers, so Phoenix 51, and some of the hiring community were saying we would have never have made these hiring decisions if it wasn't for the data and the insights that the platform gave us. But actually, what we've done is we've not only have we changed our hiring mechanism or process. You mentioned D&I earlier, but what we're looking at now is a more diverse and inclusive workforce, or and it's a work in progress, to be fair. But now we're bringing people into the business that maybe we wouldn't have been doing before, because of the objectivity around values and behaviours, and that hiring around that rigorous process. So it is very interesting, and I appreciate that there's a lot of businesses at lots of different stages around the world, but staggeringly 79% of businesses that look at competency-based interviewing, or look at assessment centers or assessment-based interviews, or people hiring, 79% of businesses still use pen and paper. And I just find that look, I know that it's an amazing invention, pen and paper, but it's absolutely crazy that we can't reuse that data or reuse them.
I completely agree.
So, you know, we want to be able to, we now live in a data-led world where people want to know what people are saying about each other. And if you haven't got that information, how can you do that? How can you give feedback to people? You know, in a volume world, for example. So it's if you're hiring in volumes and you've got 4,000 or 5,000, I mean, give us an example, Lorenzo, in your world at Amazon. I mean, everybody knows Amazon. You know, it is one of the most powerful companies on the planet. You must have literally thousands of people applying for jobs daily, like, you know, or every day. Like, you know, just give us a bit of a sense of what that's part of it.
Well, Amazon, you know, Amazon worldwide has over 1 million employees. It's a massive organization. It's just mind-boggling. The part of Amazon that I work in called Global Specialty Fulfillment, you know, so we specialize in fulfilling customers' expectations with, you know, large goods, food, groceries, all these type of things. So what we will find, we are a very responsive organization when it comes to workforce, you know, so we flex all the time. You know, if we need more people, we bring more people in. If we don't need many people, we have flexible work models to accommodate the needs of the organization. So what it means is that we can't afford reacting to things. We have to be responding to things. So it's really important that we plan ahead. And Amazon is exceptionally good at planning. That we know where the peaks and troughs are, or we can accurately estimate and identify where peaks and troughs are because we've got data. We've got data. We're constantly looking at the data. And, you know, Lee, we're looking at data with intent. And that's something that, again, that I would encourage people to do. Is too many times I've worked in organizations who, all the organizations I've worked in has some kind of ambition to be more data-led. But like to the point you made, they write it down on a piece of paper. And, you know, you think, and when I reflect on why that's the case, so they want to be data-led, but they're struggling with it. It's, again, they actually don't have a strategy. They often just think, oh, I'm just going to look at data and hope it tells me something. There's no intent behind it. They don't know, why do I need to look at the data? And, you know, also we often look at data, and particularly in HR, because we look at certain data because that's how it's always been done. I think we should really change the game and say, hang on, you know, let's look at different data. Let's look at let's ask different questions of the data. So, you know, I just think it's an Amazon, you know, it is very much about look at the data, be responsive rather than reactive. But in my experience, you know, organization, you don't have to spend millions of pounds to buy in these massive sophisticated systems. There are a host of systems which, you know, you may actually lead one on, but, you know, it is accessible to organizations. And I would just encourage organizations, you need to invest your money where you're going to get the biggest return. And talent, if you invest in it in the right way, you will get a return.
100% agree with that, and that's why you know, I've been on record so many different times and on this very show as well, thinking it's utterly crazy that we don't have a more sophisticated way of bringing the most important asset into our business, which is talent. There's no doubt. Got a couple of questions I think coming in from some of the live platforms. So Matt Smith over on LinkedIn has asked, do you agree, Lorenzo, with a 4-day split office working from home week that can potentially be more productive than a 5-day office week? So I don't think he's saying, can you authorize everyone at Amazon to have a 4-day week? But I think what Matt's saying is,
can't.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what Matt's saying is could it be more productive? Because we have seen data coming in that people are more productive since they've been working from home.
You know, Matt, it's a good question. I'm not going to even commit to a 4-day working week. I think we need options. Yet again, you know, organizations need to look at, you could have a 3-day working week, you know, if it's productive. I think for me, it's a case of moving away from the traditional 5-day a week, this is how it's always been done, and really look at what is the most effective thing for your organization. You know, a friend of mine works in an organization where they have unlimited leave. I think that's awesome.
That's amazing.
And actually,
that's amazing.
You know, and they loving it. And when you ask, but they are not all on leave all the time. You know, so I am a big supporter of thinking about working models differently. We in 2021, we need to radically change this.
I agree. It's a brilliant question. Thanks, Matt. And I suppose finally from us, Lorenzo, so I'm assuming that I've more than taken up more of your time, which is typically the listeners and viewers know that I do this every week. So forgive me. I'm squeezing out another 5 minutes off you. As a leader in your field and the experience that you've had, what would be your kind of, I don't know, top 3 takeaways or pieces of advice that you would give other people in your position or other organizations that are looking into, what we've been talking about today? They may have a problem with talent waste, or they may have some of the issues that we've talked about. What would be your 3 kind of key takeaways, for example?
I've been thinking about that prior to today, Lee. My first takeaway would be challenge the status quo. And it's such an easy thing to say, but you know what? We really need to change the game. And we are dealing with new problems that we can't solve with solutions of 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So my first thing is, you're a leader in the business. Change your environment. Think about the opportunities that you can have rather than all the limitations and why you need to do things the old way. So if you're working on pen and paper, think about practical solutions to make it more digital, and what the benefits would be. So really challenge the norm. I think the second thing that I would say is take a step back and think about, what talent do you need for the future? And are you reacting to situations, or are you responsive to it? As I said right in the beginning of the podcast, there's too many organizations, they want talent, but they don't actually know what it means.
Yeah.
And just take a step back and again, and I would actually not talk to HR people about talent. Is talk to other people in the business, talk to marketing, talk to sales, talk to whoever the case may be, and other organizations, but just really expand, what talent could be. And then the third thing, and this is certainly something that I've learned, is when it comes to considering solutions, considering different ways of thinking. For instance, how do you segment your talent? Work with other organizations or other parts of your organization, again, outside of HR. Work with marketing, see how they do, segmentation. How do they create personas of customers? And think about how can you apply some of those things in the world of talent. So if you have to create personas around talent, if you have to segment talent in a way that makes sense to your organization, by doing it differently, look at what other parts of the organization does. Because I think, in my experience, that could be a game changer. It certainly has been for me.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, your insights are superb. And actually, one of the key things that resonated with me during our meeting today, during the podcast, is that you said that you're a big supporter of insights and real-time tools for the consumer, and actually putting yourself into a consumer-led role and then bringing that back to talent. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. You're looking at it from a different angle, which means that you get a different solution, and the same principles applying to talent would be something very, very different. So I love your take, Lorenzo. I love the way that you look at things slightly differently, and that transformation, that change comes through. You are without a doubt an expert in your field, and we've had an absolute blast having you on the podcast today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lee. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Good stuff. And just Lorenzo, just quickly, if anybody wants to catch up with Lorenzo before, we've put your LinkedIn in the chat, so everybody can have where you are, so you can have a look on that. We'll be producing some clips and uploading to Spotify and YouTube and so on and so forth. You can always catch up with all of the previous episodes and this wonderful episode with Lorenzo as well. But for now, you've been Lorenzo Giliomee. I'm Lee McQueen. This is the Talent Waste Show. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Lee.